What is happening, boys and girls? Jim here, RCAD. Today is Wednesday, December 25th, 2024. It's Christmas Day. Merry Christmas to everyone out there. Happy holidays. Hopefully, everybody's enjoying the holiday season so far. You guys read the video description. You know what's going on. We're getting ready to unbox this RedCat Ascent Fusion 1/10 scale RTR brushless rock crawler. My brother received this sweet looking vehicle as a Christmas gift and was kind enough to allow me to do an unboxing video on it for you guys and gals before he even opened it up for himself. So very cool of him. Once again, I'm in a partnership program with A-Man Hobbies and Avant Link, so I'll be leaving a link down below for the RedCat Ascent. If you guys and gals feel like purchasing one of these, I mean, don't go out of your way to do it. But if you're looking to get one and you feel like purchasing one, purchase it through the link down below, and it'll help me out just a little bit by giving me a small, very small percentage of the sale. All right, so checking out everything that the box has to say. RedCat Ascent Fusion 1/10 scale brushless electric four-wheel drive rock crawler. This has a Hobbywing Fusion SE system in it, an 1800 kV brushless combo. So the motor and ESC are built in one little unit there, which works out pretty darn good. Keeps all your wires nice and tidy, and a lot of great reviews on those Hobbywing brushless combos. I'm really impressed with them. They work pretty darn good. So this has a Hobbywing 1800 kV brushless fusion system in it. RTR. See, the way they have this stuff written, excuse me for 1 second, guys and gals, but the way they have this stuff written is not laid out very well. I don't know who wrote this stuff out, man, but I'd like to smack that person upside the head a couple times. So Hobbywing Fusion RTR. RTR is the vehicle. It's ready to run, not necessarily the motor. The motor is a 2-in-1 ESC motor combination. So the electronic speed controller and the motor are built in together. The motor is an 1800 kV 540 spec brushless motor. FOC stands for Field Orientated Control. That's part of the program, part of the system, programming that's inside the electronic speed controller for field orientated control. That the easiest way that I can translate field orientated control to you guys and gals is that the vehicle senses a load on the drivetrain and the ESC and motor compensate for it. So in layman's terms, let's say you're crawling with the vehicle and you're holding your transmitter in your hand and you have the trigger in one position on your throttle. So you're holding the throttle in one position. When you come up to a tall obstacle, a normal brushed motor, you'd have to give more throttle input. You'd have to keep squeezing that trigger a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder until the vehicle climbed up and over the obstacle and overcame the obstacle. With the FOC technology, it senses the load on the machine and it compensates for it automatically. So if you're holding that throttle in one position and you come up to that obstacle, you don't necessarily have to give it any more throttle to get over the obstacle unless you want to go faster. If you hold that throttle in the same position, the vehicle senses the load, compensates for it, applies more power, and the vehicle will just keep on climbing up and over the obstacle. It's almost unstoppable, and you can just keep that throttle held in the same position, and it's just so smooth and steady. It just keeps compensating for it, and the vehicle just keeps on going. So that's my best explanation on FOC, which is field orientated control. But the way they have this written out in here doesn't necessarily make any sense. Hobbywing Fusion RTR brushless 2-in-1 FOC system. FOC, once again, is a field-orientated control system. So I don't really like the way they have the stuff written out. The motor itself is a Hobbywing Fusion SE 1800 kV motor. So some of the stuff isn't quite right. So it has an 1800 kV 540 spec brushless motor, FOC technology once again, and 2-in-1 motor and ESC combination. Works out great once again. A lot of great reviews. A competition crawler guy who's a subscriber to my channel, Dan Weiss. What's up, Dan? He came over here on Halloween, brought a few competition crawlers with him, and a couple of those vehicles had that Hobbywing 1800 kV motor in it. I was able to test drive them myself, and I got to tell you, it performed awesome. I was very impressed with them. I'm completely sold. I plan on getting a bunch of those for all of my rock crawlers. I really love these Hobbywing Fusion systems. All right, moving on to our chassis. This has a 3mm thick carbon fiber chassis and components on it. So our shock towers are 3mm thick, made of carbon fiber. The frame is 3mm thick, made of carbon fiber. Everything's carbon fiber. So carbon fiber frame rails, carbon fiber shock towers, carbon fiber motor mount. And it says it lowers your motor position to 6.5 millimeters. Now, I'm not too sure what that's all about. Lowers your motor position 6.5 millimeters relative to what? To the regular RedCat Ascent that has the brush combo in it. I'm not too sure what they're getting at on here with the lowers your motor position 6.5 millimeters. 6.5 millimeters compared to what? Is my thought on that. So once again, not necessarily written out the best on that stuff. Moving on, brass parts included and installed. So that's pretty cool. The vehicle comes with some brass upgrades already. It's cool for the people who are purchasing the vehicle, maybe not so cool for those aftermarket companies like Samex and Yeah Racing, and Hot Racing, and Trio, who make all these brass upgrades for these vehicles. It kind of, slits their throats on making a sale there for the vehicle, just because RedCat already jumped the gun and gave you some stuff for it. All right, so brass parts included and installed. It has a 46-gram brass outer portal covers, black with machined edges, and 92 grams of total brass on the vehicle. So that covers that. Once again, checking out the vehicle. Great looking truck. Love this truck. It looks so sweet. Looks great on the box. I can't wait to see what it looks like out of the box. 1/10 scale, 4-wheel drive, brushless, 2.4 gigahertz transmitter and receiver. Quick change under drive. On the transmission. Now, I'm not too sure if they are referring to the differentials on the axles or like on the transfer case, the drive shaft leading to the front axle or the drive shaft leading to the back axle, if they're talking about underdriving or overdriving those, or if they're talking about underdriving or overdriving the transmission itself. They're not very clear on that. And carbon fiber chassis. Okay, so that's everything that's on this half of the box. Let's flip it around and check out the other side. Checking out the next half of the box here, we're going to be a little bit redundant as we read some of this stuff off. RedCat Ascent Fusion 1/10 scale brushless electric 4-wheel drive rock crawler. Carbon frame rail chassis, carbon fiber frame rail chassis. Carbon fiber frame rails once again, shortened rear frame rail, that's new information. Carbon fiber shock towers front and rear, carbon fiber motor mount. Lowers your motor position 6.65 millimeters.
RedCat really needs to work on their descriptions here. The motor isn't necessarily lowered 6.65 millimeters. The whole motor is tilted backwards. The back half of the motor is tilted downwards 6.65 millimeters back by the cross member to get the center of gravity a little bit lower. So the motor is following that front frame rail and is tilted backwards or downward to follow that front frame rail. That way it keeps the weight lower in the chassis. So the motor isn't necessarily lowered 6.65 millimeters, but it is tilted 6.65 millimeters. So they need to kind of change that stuff up a little bit.
High clearance front and rear steel bumpers. Keep in mind, plastic slides over rocks better than metal. But these are high clearance and they're kind of narrow. So checking out our rear bumper here. It is tucked in behind the tires, so no worries about contacting anything with that. And it looks like it has a little bit of a winch fair lead opening on the back there. And then checking out the front bumper, which is pretty narrow. Once again, an opening for a fair lead on the front. We have an open spur gear on our transmission, which is okay. An open pinion gear. Our little rock slider slash skid plates here on the side. Looks like we have a receiver sitting on one portion of it right there. All right, moving on. RedCat beadlock wheels and crawler tires. Usually RedCat includes plastic beadlock wheels with their vehicles. Can't say anything about the tires. Not too sure about those as of yet. So we'll see how they work out. Maximum ground clearance, 86-degree approach angle, 101-degree departure angle, 70 millimeters of ground clearance. Why did they say maximum ground clearance if they're starting off with approach angles and departure angles? So we have an 86-degree approach angle, 101-degree departure angle, and 70 millimeters of ground clearance. That's a low center of gravity chassis, so 70 millimeters of ground clearance is probably okay. Moving on, quick change underdrive transmission. We have 20% underdrive gears installed. 10% and 0% underdrive gears are included in the box. And you can easily change the gears without removing the transmission. 32-pitch internal transmission gears for smooth operation. Well, really, if you want a smoother operation, then 48-pitch would be much better. 32 pitch is kind of chunky. 32 pitch is fine out here for your spur gear and your pin gear since they're exposed to the elements. But if it had 48-pitch internal gears, it might be a little bit smoother as far as things go. Not too sure what they're underdriving here with our transmission gears. They're not being specific as to which gear they're underdriving and whether it's underdriving or overdriving a axle. Let's say underdriving or overdriving your rear axle or your front axle, or sorry, rear axle or front axle, or if they're trying to underdrive the transmission itself. I mean, usually for transmission adjustments, you would do it right here with your spur gear and your pinion gear. Going to a smaller pinion gear for more low-end power, or a larger spur gear for more low-end power. Smaller spur gear for more top speed, larger pinion gear for more top speed. Or what they're trying to do. So they say 20% underdrive gears installed, but they're not telling you whether they're underdriving the transmission itself or whether they're underdriving or overdriving a front or rear differential. So that's a bit confusing. So not too sure what they're underdriving and overdriving.
All right, so once again, RedCat not being very specific here. If we look at the motor, the pinion gear, and the spur gear, basically that's all there is up there. It's all very naked. All you have is the pinion gear and then the spur gear and a drive shaft going right back to the transmission slash transfer case. Now the gear up on top on our transmission there. That is the gear coming in, or the power coming in from the motor and the spur gear. The next gear over on the left-hand side is the gear leading to the front axle, and then the gear on the right-hand side is a gear leading to the back axle. So it's dividing the power right there. And that is where they have the underdrive installed, is going to the rear axle to slow down the rear axle. That way the front axle is spinning just a little bit faster than the rear, which gives the front end a little bit of a dig function. So once again, RedCat needs to explain this a little bit better. But up front, once again, all we have is the motor, pinion gear, spur gear, and then a straight shot back to the transmission. Top gear in the transmission is our input. Gear on the left is the gear going to the front axle. Gear on the right is going to the rear axle, and that's all there is to it. Very simple little setup.
Right here, it's not very. They don't give a real good explanation on that, so my apologies for that. All right, moving on. Metal shocks and links. Aluminum adjustable coilover shocks. New soft outer front springs with internal springs installed. Rear shocks have internal spring removed for more articulation. And then they include black anodized metal suspension and steering links. But they're not high clearance links. So that leaves a spot for those guys like Yeah Racing and Trio and all the other aftermarket companies to come out with some high clearance links for the vehicle. Checking out the shocks, internally sprung on the fronts once again, no internal spring on the rears. As far as internally sprung shocks go, I'm on the fence about those. I'd rather have my shock springs on the outside of the shocks versus on the inside. Having that shock spring on the inside of your shock limits the travel of your shock overall. This one right here, having it on the lower half of the position on the piston, means that the shock's not going to be able to extend quite so far. If you had it on the upper half of the piston, it wouldn't be able to compress as far. So not very sold on that whole internal spring deal there, just because it limits the travel of the shock piston itself.
Now, the way the front shock is set up with that spring on the inside, that's not allowing that piston to fully travel in the downward position. There's no problem going up. You can fully compress the shock, but it's not allowing it to fully extend, which ultimately what it's doing is keeping more downward pressure on the front end. So if you start to climb up over a hill or over an obstacle, it's holding the front end down a little bit, giving it more down pressure on the front end, which ultimately gives you a little bit more traction and helps it climb a little bit better as well. So having that spring on the inside of the shock, right where it's sitting below the piston, is kind of a good thing in this situation because it's going to give the vehicle a little bit more power to the ground.
Moving on to our axles here, V3 portal axles. Wow, they're on to version 3 already. RedCat Gen 8 had version 1s. And we've got one of those sitting on the shelf, and it works out pretty good. All right, so version 3 portal axles, reduced torque twist, red metal wheel hexes and lock nuts, low profile red anodized aluminum gear cover for more steering angles. We're talking about your differential cover here being low profile. They say for more steering angle. I'd imagine so your steering link when you're turning left to right won't come into contact with that diff cover. Double shear shock mounts, Mod 1 steel gears, CNC aluminum spool. So CNC machined aluminum spool. That always bugs me when they put the word CNC in on a product description and they don't say machined afterwards. So our spool here was made on a CNC machine. So CNC machined aluminum spool. That's just the spool that holds your differential gear or your ring gear. The ring gear is made out of hardened steel, I want to say. But the spool itself was made on a CNC machine. As far as double shear shock mounts, these are the shock mounts right here on top of the axle. Double shear meaning it's being held in on either side. So the eyelet on your shock fits in right here. It's being pinched in on either side and has a screw going through the middle versus the shock that's being mounted on one side or the other and a screw coming through. It's being held in on either side with one single screw holding it together. Moving on, heavy-duty axles and portal gears. Why didn't they include that into this description? Updated V3 design, version 3. One-piece front axle housing for greater strength. Universal joint style front axle. So right here, talking about the steering knuckle, has a U-joint on it versus a dog bone. A universal joint has a tighter turning radius versus a dog bone. But a constant velocity joint, a CVD, has a greater turning radius than the universal joint. And even greater than that would be a double cardan joint, which has 2 CVDs. So this is kind of a step down. It's a step up from dog bones. It's a step down from a CVD, and 2 steps down from a double cardan joint. All right, so that's everything that we have on this half of the box. Let's spin it around. Moving on to the last full-size panel on our box here. Really not much to read off over here, just more redundancy. RedCat Ascent Fusion 1/10 scale brushless electric 4-wheel drive rock crawler. Back to our same jargon here about our carbon fiber frame rails and our motor position sitting at 6.65 millimeters with no explanation as to what the relevance is behind that. And talking about our high clearance front and rear steel bumpers. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of different pictures of the truck from different angles, showing you the coolness of the vehicle, how cool it looks, how sweet it is, and that's about it. Check out the next side. Not much to see over here. Some legal jargon. We can see that it was designed in Arizona over there, and that it's a cool looking truck. And check out the last side. Excuse our unprofessionalism and our camera sitting sideways. What's included is your transmitter and your vehicle itself. What's not included is batteries for the transmitter, batteries for the vehicle, or a charger. So you're going to need 4 AA batteries for the transmitter. You're going to need a 2S or a 3S LiPo battery for the vehicle itself, a soft pack battery, and a charger for that battery. All right, let's get this baby flipped open and see what she looks like on the inside.
All right, well, we got manual here.
It was pretty thin.
Yeah, right.
Not much of a manual there.
Cool RedCat stickers.
A lot of extra stickers in there. Looks like some number plates here. Some little sponsorship logos down there of sorts. And a bunch of other stickers in there. What you
Got a transmitter.
got? Pretty basic.
Yeah, right.
I just see the truck and the transmitter and the manual is all I see.
Yeah, nice.
That's a good looking transmitter.
Oh, cool.
Copy. No any digital readouts or anything?
Yeah, no.
No, all analog.
Just a bunch of switches and some lights.
Take a peek at that.
Mm-hmm.
RTX4C. I wonder if that means it's a 4-channel.
Could be.
I see servo reversing. Oh, throttle reversing. Bind. R LED, G LED, red LED, green LED. Steering trim, throttle trim. Steering EPA, our power switch. We got some buttons here as well.
That's cool.
Channel 3. So it is a 4-channel. There's a channel 4 3-position switch there. LED button there. So apparently a 4-channel radio, LED button. That's not bad.
Yeah,
Running on
cool.
4 AA batteries. That looks got on the panel right there too. I wonder what that's for. 4 AA batteries and some other panel here on the side. I always get excited when I see a panel like that on a analog transmitter. What that says, something about this manufacturer stuff, I think. That's weird.
Nothing.
Nothing that I can see. Just an empty pocket back there.
Weird.
Little 420 pocket on your transmitter. Perhaps. I have no idea what that's for.
Crazy.
Maybe it says something in the manual. I say maybe it says something in the manual, but the manual,
Doesn't have much.
wow, it's pretty thin.
Huh.
I know your transmitter right there.
All right.
What you got? Your bunch of zip ties? Is it good?
Yeah, a bunch of zip ties and cardboard and credit card for that.
Hold on,
Lots of
so
wood.
let me see. Get this out of here. I'm gonna help you.
Oh, there you go.
All right, you got it.
Feather trim. That's pretty. Yeah, a lot of zip ties are good.
Nylon straps.
Mm-hmm.
That's sweet. That's like a red chrome I see right now. That red chrome over black. That looks good. Red over chrome. Always looks good. Blue over chrome, green over chrome. Any kind of paint over chrome. Always just eye catching. Chunk of zip tie there.
Pieces of zip tie.
Yeah, this one's reusable. See, if you save one, we might be able to reuse something.
First.
Thanks for using.
Used to be it.
What do we got here? We do have a little medley of spare parts here. Camera flash is probably not going to show much. That looks like an upper body mount on a Gen 8. That looks like another body mount right there. Shock tower / body mount. I recognize those. And some other stuff in here. What's that? There's a tray in here of some sorts, either a battery tray or receiver tray. Right, receiver tray. Not sure, but spare parts. Parts is parts. You saving nylon straps?
Yeah. A couple of them might be usable.
These two are pretty well shot.
Nice. Beauty.
A little bit of plastic wrap on the hood there.
Nice. That's sharp. What do you think?
I think it looks pretty sharp.
Yeah, that's cool. It rips straight down the hood.
Go ahead and peel your plastic off it, and I'll get the camera in it, take a peek at it. I'm gonna start at the top. Maybe it went okay. Whatever. I thought you might have been pulling against the corner. Is that a scratch on there? Right here, I can just see it in this light. There's something right here.
I think it's from the film because it only. I
Maybe
don't
it-
know.
I'll
Just
go
up
now.
here, I see a little outline.
Okay, maybe it's from the film. That's a good looking truck.
Oh,
You can go ahead and pick it up, look at it, check it all out. I'll get the camera off the tripod. I'm gonna get a better look at it here in a moment.
That's more nice.
It's a beauty, Clark.
She sure is.
You have a winch mount front and rear,
Yeah.
shortened frame rails, from what I read. Steel bumpers.
Nice.
Now, RedCat kind of means this to be like a competition crawler, RTR comp crawler, but just it's not necessarily a comp crawler. I mean, as far as RTRs go, if you were to compare this against a TRX4 Bronco or a Axial FCX 10.3, then yes, it's definitely more of a comp crawler compared to those vehicles. But if you were to compare it to an actual competition crawler, um, it's probably a far cry from an actual competition crawler. I think it hinges.
Yeah, it does. Nice.
Beautiful truck though, especially for the money. It's an excellent truck. You get a lot of good quality parts for the money. A lot of quality parts for the money. The brushless motor, the way everything is set up in here,
Wow.
it's pretty quality across the board. XT60.
Yeah.
I do have a connector, custom connector for an XT60
Yeah,
and XT90.
You just happen to have one.
Your motor down there. Motor sitting on a slight angle, I see. Ever so slight. Transmission sitting on more of an angle than it looks like the motor.
Wow.
That looks kind of weird. All right, let's take the camera off the tripod and check her out. Body's unhinged on the front. We have our 1800 kV hobby wing motor. Our transmission, pretty basic to here, just the pinion gear going to the spur gear, going straight back to the transfer case. Back there. It's got some weight to it, really, as I'm spinning it around. These skid plates down here are beveled. I can feel a little bevel to them. They feel like Delron or plastic or something, but they are beveled. Nice shape to them, really, on the skid plates. I'm going to tweak this over. Yeah, a lot of good ground clearance right there. Standard links fore and aft. I'd imagine if it had some high clearance links on it, it would probably improve its handling a little bit more. The link right here is bowed. These are bowed outward. So they'd have to be some custom high clearance links. Might end up hitting the motor because the motor is just so low in the chassis.
Get one for the back though.
Looking at the pinion gear. That's a that looks like a press-on pinion gear. Oh, there it is. I see the pinion shaft. Never mind. I was thinking that was a press-on pinion gear there for a second, but now I see the grub screw right there. Okay, it was hidden behind that bracket right there. So it was throwing me for a loop. There we go. That's a nice motor. No doubt about that. 1800 kV. Once again. All right, so they got our transmission back here. Our battery wires are kind of being held in by a battery strip. Now they said about the overdrive, underdrive, quick change, that'd be back in here. So apparently you can just remove one of these screws and swing this open like a door. Yeah, that's it. You pull out this screw here, loosen that screw there, disconnect your drive shaft, and you can swing this thing open like a door on the back.
Yeah,
That's what it
looked
looked like.
Gear clusters in here.
That's what it looked like in the box. Now They did say something about a 20% underdrive. I'm assuming the way they got the setup right here that they're dividing the power from the front to the rear. You can see where our power is coming in off the transmission or off the main spur gear and pinion gear, coming back here to the basically the transmission slash transfer case, we'll say. So we're going into a gear set here, a gear set down here leading to the front axle, and a gear set over here leading to the back axle. So it is separate front to back, essentially right there. So if they have a 20% underdrive on it, they're underdriving the rear 20%, which essentially is giving you a 20% overdrive on the front. All right, well, that just solves that problem, boys and girls. I was wondering about that, where they're talking about their underdrive, and they must have the underdrive right here between these two gears, right there and right there. All right, so we just clarified all that. Sorry about all the confusion. Two things going on at the same time. Well, that's where they mean the battery to go.
Holy cow.
Well, you're probably going to end up running this battery.
Like that, yeah.
Little 1300 milliamp 2S LiPo, or 3S LiPo, is what that is. My airplane battery.
Yeah.
Something like that in there. Maybe this way to get it past all that stuff. Your Velcro's getting stuck on my Velcro. Hands are in the way. Yeah, it's got to sit something like that. Or something smaller yet.
Crazy kind of strap there. Wow.
I don't like the battery location being right
Yeah,
there. I'm going to be honest with you.
Not
I don't like
good at
that.
all. That is just...
Find a different battery that's
Wow.
not Spectrum. Spectrum battery has the smart technology in there, so it's got a little bit of extra stuff here on the end for the smart technology, so it automatically balances itself, restores itself if you don't store it within a couple days of charging it or don't use it.
Work.
So a standard, something smaller like this without that would be shorter. Well, we'll find a battery for it eventually, but apparently we're not going to find it today.
What about the Suburban battery on its side?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit too heavy. That 2S LiPo.
Yeah.
Dynamite pack.
Shorty.
Probably a little bit too heavy for this, bulky, even though this is a bulky truck. I just don't like the idea of having so much weight hanging off on the side, on either side, because then it's going to make it more rollover prone. I know people do that, but I'd rather have the weight in the center of the chassis, anywhere in the center of the chassis. Right here, in my eyes, would be better than right there. Right here would be the best.
Yeah.
That battery's going to be too huge for that.
Overkill on the strap here.
That's a lot of extra weight on one side. You almost have to counterbalance the vehicle on the other side for whatever your battery weighs, taking into account the weight of your ESC or receiver. Your ESC is in the motor. So if you were to pull the on-off switch off of here and the receiver off of here and weigh that minuscule little amount, and then weigh your battery and balance things out and add a little bit extra weight on the other side to compensate for it.
That is,
it's probably going to be the best shot. So
that is going to take some work, I think.
Or a really small battery right up here in front, opposite of the servo. Just like that. There's a little bar going across right here from side to side, stopping the battery from going back any further into the spur gear.
That would reach.
That would reach. I don't know how it would clear if we could put the hood down. Nope.
Yeah.
Maybe not with a Spectrum battery. No, it'll clear. It's pushing out the nose just a little bit, I think. Maybe.
Once it was connected, it might not be so much.
Maybe if we ran the wires, excuse me, if we ran the wires through here, to fish that through without hitting, no, it's going to run into that. That's not going to work. Well, or a battery about this size that's not a Spectrum battery without the smart stuff on the front, taking up that extra little bit of space. I mean, we could fit it in here right now, just like that, and we can close the hood, I think. Almost. Oh, there we are. Yeah, we can get it shut.
And the battery strap's in the way.
So that will work. But definitely going to have to use a small battery like this little 1300 milliamp pack. I'm usually all about the milliamps and getting as much runtime as I can out of the vehicles. We do a lot of longer trail runs and stuff around here. And some of the runs out on the adventure course that take, an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes. And so we like to have the big batteries without having to worry about going dead. But it's amazing with the brushless motors. The brushless motors are so much more efficient that they can make the batteries last a lot longer. That is for sure versus a brush motor. So I have to pick up a 1300 milliamp pack like this or something smaller like this to go along with it. I love those skid plates on the bottom are great too. Those rock sliders,
Cool color.
great shape to them. Yeah, it's a good looking truck, no doubt about it. Very nice. It already has some dog hair on it. Perfect. All right, before we close out the video on the RedCat Ascent Fusion, I decided to open up the manual, open up our parts bag, check out our quick start guide, and take a look at some of this stuff, and figured I'd show that to you guys and gals. Number one, looking at our stickers. Once again, we've got our number stickers there, a couple number plates right here, some sponsorship stickers, which would probably go on the inner or on the outer fenders of the vehicle. And then we've got some RedCat Fusion stickers here for the left door, right door, and the hood. On the other side, we've got some red stripes, some blue stripes, some red and blue beadlock rings stickers, as well as some RedCat stickers in white and red. The beadlock ring stickers, that would be kind of hard to put on, especially over top of all these screws. And I'm not sure how long those would even last for, so not sure why they would even bother wasting the time printing those things up. All right, checking out our manual. For the full manual, you have to scan the QR code right there. Otherwise, very brief little quick startup guide here telling us about our ESC parameters, where they have some of the stuff set right out of the gate, but I'm disappointed that they don't have the full schematic on here. Right here, we just basically have numbers 1 through 4 on our settings here. And I believe that there's probably 12 or 13 different settings for our motor and ESC. So if we have a Hobby Wing programming card, then you could go through and adjust all the different parameters on the ESC. But all they have here is they're just letting us know where things are set kind of right off the bat. So our cutoff voltage is set at intermediate. I think we're going to switch that over to high. Our motor rotation is counterclockwise. Drag brake force, they've got it set at level 3. Level 4, level 5 would be high, so it's kind of like a 2/3 of the way along on that one. Drag brake rate is set at level 3 as well. The higher your drag brake force, the more your motor is going to heat up, I believe. So they kind of have it set at a lower level down here. Battery installation on the transmitter. How to plug in your battery on the vehicle, plug in your XT90. I mean, really, or your XT60. It's going to be pretty much impossible to plug this in negative to positive and positive to negative. It's got to be positive, positive, or negative to negative. Otherwise, there's little gates inside the plug. It'd be almost impossible. You'd have to be like Mike Tyson or something to try to jam those two plugs together. Showing our hood being popped up here, how to pop the hood. We already know how to do that. Where to install the battery at over on the sideboard. Don't really care for that, having the battery sitting off to the side like that. Once again, I'd rather have it in the center of the chassis just to keep the weight more centralized. If there's, I just don't like it right there. I know it's kind of counterbalancing the motor. We got the battery placement right here on the side plate, and the motor sitting right here, and their servo is sitting right there. So the servo doesn't weigh as much as the motor, that's for sure. And then the battery, so maybe the battery and the servo combined is what they're trying to offset set the weight of the motor with. Our receiver and our on-off button are probably very minuscule as well, as far as weight goes. If we were to put a battery up here on the front, it's going to give us even more weight over here on this side. So we'd have to almost kind of compensate for that with a little bit extra weight over on the other side, which some lead automotive stick-on weights go a long ways. Wouldn't necessarily want to stick anything on the carbon fiber, but you know, you get the drift on that. But so they intend on the battery to be put right here on this side. But looking at all our spare parts here, we got our other underdrive gears right here, which are made of plastic. Mental note on that. A couple different springs in here for the slipper clutch. Probably 2 different rates on the springs. Some other mounts right here, or another mount right here. I'm not too sure what that's for. It looks like a shock mount on top, but the bottom of the mount looks a little bit confusing. They have some hubs to go over top of the wheel nuts. These are what came on the Gen 8. Probably came on the Everest Gen 7 as well, perhaps. And then right here, we got another battery tray, a whole another battery tray sitting right here, which is adjustable from full length down to a shorty pack. See where our Velcro straps would go in there. And this, after looking at things on here, would go right here. So you'd have to remove this cross support, and these screw holes line up perfect with one another. And you could put this thing right here, just like this inside the frame. I'm wearing my reading glasses, so excuse me for excuse me for fumbling this around. But this would fit inside the frame just like this, in between these 2 points. And then we could bolt up our battery tray on either side right here for a shorty tray, or for a full length tray. There's enough room on here since our screw holes are exposed there, so we can have a full length over here or a shorty tray right there. Only problem with that, once again, is that it would be exposed and sitting on the outside of the bed or outside of the cab. But it would definitely get the battery a little bit more centrally located versus having it sitting over here on the side. So that is another option right there. You just have to pull out this cross member and replace it with this. And our 2 halves of the battery tray right here and right here. So that was cool that they included that. Not cool that they have plastic gears. That's a bummer for sure. Otherwise, we've got more body mounts right here, solid body mounts. These are very similar to the ones that came in the RedCat Gen 8. And once again, not too sure what that post is for right there. All right, back to our manual. Just covering all the basics. You know, your steering, left and right is on the steering wheel. Forward and reverse is on the trigger. Turning on and turning off our vehicle with the on-off switch. You can program the ESC through that on-off switch as well. But since they give us such a limited program guide right here, I don't think I'd dare mess around with that. As far as turning the vehicle off, instead of holding the button for 3 seconds to turn it off, I think you'd probably be better off just unplugging your battery. So plug it in, turn it on, and when you're done with it, unplug it instead of turning it off right there. It'd be the easiest way to go about it. All right, once again, read all your stuff here if you want to check into that. You're adjusting your servos and your steering, trim left and right when before you start driving the truck, making sure that everything is good, making sure your throttle trim is in neutral. Really, you'd almost want to have the vehicle in the air. I usually keep a box laying around, and I set most of my vehicles up on boxes most of the time. Excuse this camera here, it's going to be a little bit out of whack. But normally I have something laying around that I can set the vehicle on to get the tires up in the air. And that way, when I initially turn it on, I don't have to worry about the truck taking off. So if the wheels are in the air, then you can go ahead and adjust your throttle and steering parameters and whatnot and get everything all where it needs to be. All right, so that basically covers everything on that half of the manual. Nothing at the back. So kind of just basically a quick start guide. I'd imagine if you downloaded the full manual, it might tell you a little bit more about the battery tray installation and all that other stuff as well. Now on our other little quick start guide, they've got more information here for your electronic speed controller, where that stuff's set at. Once again, get intermediate for the voltage cutoff. Basically the same thing that they just showed us in the manual, counterclockwise, where the drag brake force is set at, and that's basically it. So anyways, read all this stuff if you want to. Troubleshooting guide over on the other side. Driving stage, setup phase, yada, yada, yada. Some little facts about our ESC. 40 amp, 160 amp, 1/10 scale rock crawler, 2S, 3S LiPo compatible. BEC 7.4 volt 4 amp switch mode. The size of everything, independent programming interface, 1800 kV. Dimensions of the motor, shaft diameter 3.175. So if you're shopping for a pinion gear, it's a 3.175 bore on the pinion gear, and it's a 4-pole motor. From what I understand, the more poles you have, the more torque you have, according to Holmes Hobbies, as well as good magnets and good winding, good copper winding. There's our wire guiding right there, wire guidance. Checking out all the wires we ran. And a brief little thing in here on setting up your ESC, turning on the transmitter, and neutraling everything out. Once again, I highly recommend reading all that. It's probably set up from the factory, but just in case if things are out of whack, you can go through here and reset it up, which is basically setting up your neutral endpoints on your throttle. So be turning on your ESC, making sure your throttle's in neutral, going full throttle, waiting for a beep or something, going back to neutral, go full reverse, wait for a beep or something, go back to neutral, and just basically setting it up like that. But it should be good to go right from the factory once again. All right, so there's a brief little look at our included instructions, which are very minuscule, and a look at all our included stuff here. Once again, this I think is the most important thing to find, is this other extra battery tray that's in here. This battery tray I don't necessarily care for. If you're running a smaller 1300 milliamp 2S LiPo. I think it would work out just right, just fine. I'm dropping things. It'd work out okay if you had a battery like this in there. Possibly not a Spectrum battery without that smart stuff on here. That way it doesn't eat up as much space. But it'd probably be okay. I just don't like the idea of having a battery on the outside of the chassis. I'd rather have all the weight on the inside of the chassis. The motor weight's on the inside of the chassis. Why have a battery hanging off to the side? That just means if you're going cruising across a left-handed side hill, you're just as likely to roll over to the left because of where that's sitting. I'd definitely be a lot happier if this was sitting inside the frame rail somewhere, either up in front, right up here. Would be the best location in my eyes. Would be somewhere up here, inside the chassis. But back here would work as well. With a small enough battery, you probably never know the weight was back there. Add a little bit more weight on the front end, maybe some lead automotive stick-on weights, and balance things out like that. But just wanted to point that stuff out to you guys. All right, so there we go. There's a quick peek at the truck. We still need to find a battery for this thing that is going to be compatible, and we're going to shop around to find that, and then we'll get it all hooked up and take it out for a run. All right, so that is going to do it, boys and girls. Once again, very much appreciated for y'all sticking around and watching the video. Questions and comments are always welcome, as always. We will see you all on the next one. Thanks again.